welcome back to the F2 show. We're up and running for Formula 2 in 2022, and of course, Formula 2 is back with a bang. I'm your host, Fraser Ford, and joining me to review it all, we have Inside F2 writers Lawrence Griffin and Ed Spencer, and we have Formula 1 feeder series presenter Jim Kimberley. Coming up on the show then, we review the frantic action from the opening weekend of the season, we discuss the early championship contenders, and we answer your questions off the back of this weekend. Right, where do we even start? Formula 2 is back. It never fails to deliver, does it? It was a bit of a classic Formula 2 weekend, wasn't it, Lawrence?
Yeah, it really was. It was full of action, and with a new format, I really enjoyed the way it builded throughout the weekend, right up to the feature race. It was properly the main event, just like it should be. It was full of action. I really enjoyed the return of Formula 2. Don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. It was brilliant, wasn't it? And Ed obviously went back to the old format this week. There was so much action, wasn't there? I mean, there was as much action in 2 races this weekend as there was in 3 races at any point last season, right?
I would say so. Although I didn't mind the old format, I did prefer the return of the traditional format, and it was nice to see on the F2 bingo card that we could tick off the surprise winner of the weekend box already, with Richard Verschoor winning in the sprint. But yeah, it's good to see Formula 2 back. Some fantastic racing, proper hard-nosed racing from F2 that we all know and love. And yeah, it sets us up nicely for Jeddah in a week's time.
It absolutely does. And we had a surprise returnee to the series, Jim. How good was it to have Davide Valsecchi back in the commentary box this weekend?
What a race for him to come back to, the feature race in particular. It was just chaos at the end. It was looking, no one would call it normal or standard, but it certainly turned on its head with that late safety car and 2 cars in the pit lane with 3 wheels. And as Valsecchi said, that he ran out of words. He didn't know what to say. So it just tells you everything about Formula 2 when Davide Valsecchi cannot think of the right things to say. Him and Shakespeare sound like they had a tremendous time in the comms box, as we all did watching.
Yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it? And as you say, if Davide Valsecchi has no words, then that sums up Formula 2 and how action-packed it can be, doesn't it? And the feature race certainly was that. Okay, let's take a look at the championship standings after round 1 then. Teo Pourchaire tops the standings for the first time in his Formula 2 career. He's just 1 point ahead of Liam Lawson, who himself had 2 podium finishes this weekend on the opening weekend of the season. It was what could have been weekend for Juri Vips, but he still comes away P3 in the standings, just ahead of fan favourite Ralph Boschung, who comes away P4 in the standings after fighting at the front all weekend long. Felipe Drugovich and sprint race winner Richard Verschoor round out the top 6. In the team standings, Carlin take an early lead in the team standings with a 5-point advantage over second place Hitech. A race-winning weekend for ART and a successful weekend for Campos mean they sit 3rd and 4th in the standings. An MP and Trident round out the top 6, with 10 out of the 11 teams scoring points on the opening weekend of the season. Crazy, crazy stuff. All right, let's start with our feature race winner and championship leader, Teo Pourchaire. Maybe gifted the win in some respects, but starting the season as he means to go on, Lawrence.
Absolutely. That misfortune for Vips obviously was key in his win, because at that stage, Vips looked comfortable. He had great pace. But all credit to Pourchaire. It was a really great performance, and it wasn't simple for him either. The whole weekend wasn't simple. He had his lap deleted in qualifying, which put pressure on his final run. He managed to deliver. He had an engine failure in the sprint race. The team were up until 3 a.m. rebuilding that car. He navigated that sort of hectic start really well. He didn't have the best launch, but he managed to hold on to it. He had a brief brush with Jack Doohan. We saw in Formula 3 that sort of contact, wing to tyre, how easily that can cause a puncture. He managed to survive that one. And he drove the last 12 laps with a cracked visor. So really, the challenges came thick and fast for Pourchaire this weekend. But the fact that he still had such a good result and he comes out of that as the championship leader, I think sends a real message to the opposition. I think weekends like this, where everything doesn't quite go perfectly, but you still come out the strongest driver, those are the weekends that win you championships. He had a good qualifying, if not quite the fastest. He recovered from that setback in the sprint race, had a wonderful feature race. I think he'll be really happy with his weekend, and his rivals should be worried.
Yeah, really good start for him. Obviously, you spoke about that coming together he had with Jack Doohan. What was your take on that? Was anyone at fault there, or was that just a racing incident?
I think that one has to come down to a racing incident. It's difficult with that corner. Pourchaire turning in, taking his usual line. I think that space was always going to disappear, and I think perhaps Doohan should have just been a little bit more careful that Pourchaire was going to come across the front of him, and he's struggled to hold on to his wing at the end of the day. So that wasn't ideal for him, but he went on to have a good performance.
Cool, and obviously a brilliant pole lap for Jack Doohan. A good race pace as well in the feature race. Is he one that could potentially be a bit of a surprise championship contender, Ed, Jack Doohan?
Yeah, I would say so. I think he showed that he is definitely in the hunt for race wins. He drove pretty well in the feature race up until the first pit stop when he made that when he had that collision with Pourchaire. But I definitely think he has the potential to fight for wins this year and fight for the championship. The Virtuoso, he looks good. He looks like he's adapted to Formula 2 very well. I mean, we had a brief glimpse of it last year in Jeddah, and Yas Marina were driving for MP Motorsports. So I definitely think Doohan is going to be right up there at the moment. And especially when you think about that some of the rookies are still struggling to adapt a little bit, he's got right on it. And for me, he was extremely impressive this weekend in Bahrain.
His one lap pace looks brilliant, doesn't it? We saw it in obviously Abu Dhabi, last race of last season, and again, this weekend looks mega. So we'll see how that develops over the course of the season. Yuri Vips, his bad luck continues, doesn't it, into 2022? Unbelievable pace though throughout the weekend. Probably should have won the feature race if he didn't have that problem, Jim. He'll be encouraged by that, won't he?
He'll be encouraged. Definitely the quickest driver in race trim. His start in the feature race was tremendous, and by rights he should be walking away from this weekend with the full 25 points from Sunday. So he'll be encouraged. It was interesting on another podcast we had Josh Revel mentioning about having high-tech Vips and Armstrong all together, just like the holy trinity of unluckiness, and it just felt a little bit like that, didn't it, with seeing him just tumble down the order because of this problem at the pit stop. I was heartbroken for him. But then he did look like he was going to come back and possibly even challenge for the win. Got the podium, which was tremendous. But I did think with the safety car, like this is his chance, and we're going to see Pourchaire lose out. But I guess the tyres just didn't hang on. But if it wasn't for that, he'd undoubtedly be leading the championship right now. So massively impressive. High Tech looked like they're meaning business. So many teams do look like they're meaning business. Vips could really be pushing more than Lawson, and I know a lot of people fancy Lawson to be the Red Bull contender this year along with Deruvla, but I think a lot of people have overlooked Vips, and this weekend may show everybody that there are 3 Red Bull back drivers. Iwasi might even add him as well, but 3 Red Bull back drivers who could all challenge for the title come the end of this year.
Yeah, Red Bull drivers really showing their pace this weekend, and really looking strong. Let's talk about another one of them then, Liam Lawson. Obviously, good start to the season, and we said that if he could have a good start to the season, he could be a championship contender. Double podium, second in the championship, 1 point away from Théo Pourchaire. He'll be satisfied with that, won't you, Lawrence?
I think when he reflects, maybe sort of middle of next week, when he looks back on it, I think he will be satisfied with that. A double podium is a really good performance after being slightly off the pace in qualifying. Pourchaire took the glory today, but Liam Lawson is only 1 point behind him. And even with that, speaking in the press conference on Saturday after the sprint race, he wasn't entirely satisfied. He wasn't happy with how he performed, even though he got onto the podium. He felt that the car wasn't quite perfect. He had a lockup and suffered with vibrations during that first sprint race. I think he feels that there's much more to come. And if that's the case, then it'll be really interesting to see how he progresses throughout the season. And like you say, we're heading for a really interesting battle between the Red Bull drivers, and that top three that we had today, Lawson, Vips, Pocher, they look like they are going to have a season-long battle, and it should be really entertaining.
Yeah, I think Alex Yates regarded or called it in commentary as three heavyweights all on the podium, and add a few of those guys in there as well. I mean, let's talk about it then. Obviously, the championship contenders, Porsche, Lawson, Vips, all having good weekends. Deruvala off the, get your words out, Fraser, off the mark in a podium in the sprint race. Someone that perhaps probably is a little bit disappointed with his weekend, and a Red Bull, probably the only Red Bull driver that didn't put it all together. Dennis Hauger, maybe not the start to the season he'd be hoping for, Ed.
No, not really. Considering Prema have more from him, and I'm sure he would have as well, been the juggernaut of Formula 2 for the past 2 years, they would have expected a little bit, just couldn't really hook it up in qualifying, and that put him on the back foot, going into the sprint. The feature race, he was desperately unlucky. Pit lane start, no fault of his own, was charging through the field, looked set for a couple of points, and then the unthinkable happens. The tyre flies off in the pit lane, and no chance to get him restarted. And him and Callum Williams were probably two of the unluckiest men in Bahrain at that time. So he will be very unhappy with the way his first weekend's gone. But I don't think you can necessarily say, oh, well, this is going to, basically set the tone for the rest of the season, because Dennis Hauger is, in the Prema because he is one of the talented young juniors in motorsport at the moment. So he'll get it together. But I think the only thing I would say to people watching is be patient with him, give him time, and then you'll see him back at the front, maybe around Imola time when we come back to Europe.
I think it's really interesting to note, going back from the last year's format to this one as well, that Hauger could have had an entirely different experience, because we've got this reverse grid that he would have been on the front row for Sprint Race 2 had we had Sprint Race 2, and he would have gone away with much more confidence. But what I really like with the new format, or revised format, is the point allocation as well. So even if that was the case, you go and take the win like Vashaw did, 10 points, it's still a lot of points, but it's not a big chunk. So Vashaw is sitting sixth in the championship because of the victory and then a DNF. But that's excellent. I think it's really rewarding the drivers who are consistent. So if Hauger's going to qualify in 15th place, you're not going to do well all season. You're starting 2 races from 15th without any possibility, like we had last year, to start one of the races in maybe second, third, fourth when you make your way up the field. So it's been punished for it, but at least it's a long old season where we could have some fight backs. But really, really great to see the format running as it is. It's really showing the drivers who are consistent, like somebody who finished 4th place twice, how good they are.
I agree, and it puts that pressure on qualifying, which is really important for these drivers to be able to show their pace in qualifying, and it allows them to be aggressive in that first sprint race. We never want to see drivers having to hold back, and that seemed like it could have happened a few times last season. So the fact that everybody was so aggressive yesterday in the sprint race was brilliant to see, and we saw from Porsche, even if that was a racing incident and you drop out of the top 10, you get no points, you can still gain the biggest point haul of the weekend, even with that. So it gives a reason for it to be action from qualifying through the first sprint race all the way to the feature race. So I think this weekend was proof of the good changes that have been made to the format.
I was just going to say, I think it puts a further emphasis on nailing your qualifying times, because with last year's format, you could sort of get away with it if you put in a good charge through the order in sprint race 1. Now you have to really nail it. If you make one tiny little mistake, you go over the line with one corner, you're going to be in trouble for the sprint and the feature, and you won't get a second chance. So that really is another good point, is that qualifying has that extra element of spice, knowing that it really could set the tone for your weekend, and also give you an idea of how much work you've got to do during the 2 races. It can be done when you see guys coming from the back into the points. Wasser is a prime example of that. But it may not be so frequent, especially if you get stuck in a big wall of traffic.
Yeah, let's talk about Awasa then. Perhaps the surprise of the weekend: 22nd to 8th in sprint in the sprint race, 22nd all the way up to 7th in the feature race. Before obviously an engine issue cost him points. Thoroughly entertaining to watch. Was it a bit of a what could have been weekend for him, Jim? And where could he have been if he didn't stick it in the gravel trap in qualifying? Where could he have been?
Difficult to say. I don't know how strong he would have qualified. Probably the surprise package of the weekend for me. He was fine in Formula 3. Got one race win and did okay, but he certainly didn't look like a standout driver throughout the season. So to come in and overtake literally everybody in the field on his first weekend, never expected that. So how good could he have done? I don't know. Jake's mentioned it completely right, that he was getting to the sharp end of the field where the drivers would have maybe a bit more experience. The ones we're looking at the top of the championship right now, the second-year drivers who we rate as championship challengers, with all due respect to some of the people further back, overtaking, I won't mention names, overtaking somebody towards the back of the field isn't going to be so impressive as overtaking somebody like Liam Lawson towards the front. So I don't know if he would automatically have won, like some people seem to think that he could have, but it could definitely have been challenging for a really decent haul of points. Kicking himself, no doubt, for the qualifying issues, but like I said before, it's a long old season, and will definitely be on the radar for those Red Bull drivers that we mentioned earlier who were hoping to get the championship, because I think we mentioned it possibly in one of the previous shows, was that Helmut Marko is going to look at this Red Bull stable, and Deruvala has to win and dominate if he's going to get the Formula One seat. Lawson and Vips could probably win without dominating to get the seat. But if Lawson wins in his second year, or Deruvala wins in his third year, but only just ahead of Iwasa, or Iwasa's just there or thereabouts in his first year in F2, that gives Helmut Marko a really big head scratcher. So if he has another weekend like this without the qualifying, we could really see Porsche plus a Red Bull 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe Hauger can turn his season around as well. So Red Bull Junior team looking really strong.
It was Alpine last season, wasn't it? It's looking Red Bull, the strong driver program this season. So yeah, we'll see how that develops. Richard Verschoor, obviously the last driver to sign up for 2022, the first driver to win in 2022. What a story! He was the winner of the sprint race. Lawrence, how happy were you for him?
Oh, absolutely delighted, and I think everybody throughout the paddock and every Formula 2 fan was delighted to see Verschoor winning. I mean, even the manner of his victory was impressive. He held that strong gap throughout. He nailed the start and never really looked back. He retained the lead during the virtual safety car, and he never really looked troubled. And like you say, this is the man. This time last month, he didn't even have a seat on the grid at all. The last driver to be confirmed and the first to take a race win. I mean, what a story. And he's worked hard all throughout the winter to get sponsors on board. He writes the sponsor agreements and contracts himself. He communicates directly with the sponsors all himself. So what a phenomenal effort for the previous months and just yesterday in the race. And what story as well for Trident, their first Formula 2 win since 2016. I mean, that combined with it being Verschoor as the driver to win, the feel-good factor around that win for that driver and that team was just immense, and it was wonderful to see. He's shown his quality in the past, and he's proved it again yesterday. And hopefully, he retains that seat throughout the season to get a proper opportunity to show what he can do throughout a season and really build a strong year. And hopefully, he doesn't get sucked into that game of Formula 2 musical chairs that really troubled him.
One thing I'd say with the Trident element as well, as you allude to there, Lawrence, is Callum Williams, who I wasn't expecting great things from. Maybe this is my problem to the rookies here, not expecting great things. Wow, did he turn it on? And if it wasn't for the fateful pit stops, it could have been a decent haul of points for Trident. And Williams really surprising me, especially after sprint race when he was struggling towards the back, as we saw Verschoor at the front. I thought, oh, this is going to be another story where you've got one of the drivers who is definitely worthy of the seat and somebody who maybe isn't. But I really reassessed my thoughts on that guy after the feature race. If it wasn't for that pit stop, yeah, Williams could be taking points on debut weekend and looking like making part of a duo of Trident drivers who are going to really boost that team forwards. They're doing so well in F3 that it's great to see them take a win in F2.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about that, the pit lane incident, because obviously wheels flying around in the pit lane isn't what we want to see. We actually had a question at Emma_Carol97 asked, does Formula 2 need to adopt a pit lane approach similar to Formula 1 where they have a minimum stationary time in order to avoid incidents like we've seen today, Ed? Because it's not what we want to see, is it?
No, it isn't really, especially considering how packed the pit lane is with all the mechanics, of course, the marshals, and also the Formula One teams preparing for the Grand Prix in the afternoon. It is a concern considering that we had not one but two tyres fly. I think we'll probably have to have a system introduced if this continues, or we'll have an official looking over the pit crew, watching them install all four tyres, and then maybe system has to go if they're not properly attached. It is something that I think Bruno Michel will be keeping an eye on if this keeps happening. But I think two incidents every weekend won't be happening. I think it was a freak incident what happened in the feature.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because we don't want to see that again, do we? So yeah, let's hope that all gets sorted. Jim, we saw some frantic action in the midfield, didn't we? Some of that was, well, Roy Nissany, some aggressive defending moves today. Was it a little bit too far, would you say?
I did chuckle when I knew I was going to have this question thrown at me, thinking how political should I be with my answer. Nissany should know better. That's the best way you can say it. This guy isn't coming here with the need to prove himself as somebody who's going to be somebody to watch for the future as some plucky 20-year-old who's had an early graduation to Formula 2. This guy's been doing Formula 2 for a long time. He's been doing a lot of racing outside of Formula 2 as well. There was no need to be moving across the track as you were that late in the race. Clearly the tyres are going off against faster cars. I don't know what was up with him, with being that eager to keep the positions. And maybe that's because I'm not a racer, but I've watched a lot of races and I've seen a lot of great racing drivers not be so urgent to keep the positions. You choose your battles and then you pick your fight for another time. So if he's going to lose a position in sector 2, come back on the main straight with the help of DRS or something. Just think more than one step ahead, because it just had the screaming of the desperation to clutch onto the position you're in, and it wasn't with any forward thinking. So, as I'm sure a lot of people have seen at the time of recording, Richard Verschoor's comments on Twitter, still online, he's not happy. And it wasn't unhappiness with the driver that spun him round, it was unhappiness of being put in that position.
All right, let's briefly look ahead to Jeddah next weekend, the upcoming race. Produced, chaos last year, Lawrence. Can we expect the same this year?
It would be strange to think that there wouldn't be chaos again, would it? It's Formula 2 and it's that Jeddah circuit. So yeah, I think chaos again. And it'll be an interesting race to see who's learnt from last weekend. The likes of Hauger, who have not had ideal starts, how can they learn from their races this week and get on top of it? You know, we've spoken about Iwasa. Can he hook up a good qualifying and have a good race there? I think it'll be really interesting to see how everybody gets on, and full of action again, I'm sure.
Obviously, podiums last time we went to Jeddah for Liam Lawson, for Yuri Vips, and for Ralph Boschung last year. A win for Armstrong as well. How much would that experience benefit them returning to Jeddah, Ed?
I think it will give them more of an advantage for the rookies going there for the first time. Bearing in mind, last year F3 weren't with F2, so the F3 rookies really are going to go into this weekend a little bit unsure what challenges are facing. Last year, I think most of us will remember it for being a little bit of a demolition derby, considering that we had the feature race rather disrupted and there were several incidents. But I think Armstrong will definitely be going in confident, considering that he had a good weekend, if you think about it, even if he had that spin in the first sprint, 5th place in the feature, gets his campaign off to a very good start. Liam Lawson, of course, is going to be thereabouts. It would be wrong to assume that he wouldn't be. Vips as well. Jaruvla, I mean, he finished in front on the track, but obviously he got pegged back 5 seconds, so he could be in the hunt. And also the likes of Jack Doohan. He went well for MP. He could go well again for Unai Virtuosi. So we're really going in with a completely open mind. And I know Jim is waiting for me to say, he's anxiously waiting for me to throw Ralph Boschung into the mix, and he certainly can win this weekend. He's a bit of a street course warrior, if you think about it, considering he did so well at Monte Carlo and Baku last year. He could go well again. So we really have a completely open roulette wheel that we are just waiting to be spun and waiting to land on a driver's number.
Go on, Jim. It's where he took his first podium last season. Could it be the place of his first victory this season, Ralph?
It would be almost as poetic as Ed's comments about the roulette wheel there. So to go from the place to take your first podium to also be the place you take your first win. I think we saw this weekend, he's not there to fill the numbers. I couldn't believe how he was consistently up there. I thought maybe after the reverse grid and lightning start in both races, actually, but the reverse grid, that could be his shining moment of the weekend. But we say consistency is key, and he was consistently up there battling for podium positions, and he's very unlucky not to have one. I'll admit I have a slight bias in that, but I think that's fair to say that his falling back in the order was because he got himself into those podium places early on. I was more heartbroken on the sprint race to see him just continually move back. But after the restart on the feature race, he just seemed to actually have the pace. He seemed to actually be able to manage it a little bit better. I don't know if we'll see him win next time out, but I think Campos aren't a backmarker team at all now. I think they're looking one of the stronger outfits. It's going to be an interesting season, and I do think we'll see Boschung on the top step of the podium at some point. And just a quick note as well on the street track that we're coming up to, because it's wild. I know they're opening, so I've read some stuff. They're opening the track somewhat to increase visibility. But I really think qualifying could see some of the rookies, the drivers going in without experience of that circuit, struggle on that first day for no fault of their own. It looks like an absolute roller coaster, destruction derby, as we called it, to watch. So the drivers who have already had a bit of experience there not long ago, was it 4 months? That's fresh in their minds. I think that could have a massive advantage to the drivers who have already raced there.
Yeah, let's wait and see. It's going to be fascinating, isn't it? So bring it on. But that's all we have time for today. My thanks to Lawrence, to Jim, and to Ed for joining me on today's show. And thank you to you guys at home for watching as well. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more Formula 2 content, hashtag the F2 show to get involved in the conversation. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.